Okay, today this is the first interview in my Interviewing the Future of America series. And today I am speaking to Kristina Oakes from South Carolina. And I do appreciate you talking to me today, Kristina.
Thank you.
And just to let everyone know, Christine is not pretty much a random interview with me. I speak with her normally. We don't exactly talk about what we're going to talk about today, but we do talk quite frequently. So I just want to put that out there. So in case anyone wants to say anything was staged, but we don't commonly talk about things we're going to talk about today. And that's where I wanted to start. How did you first get involved in politics? Is that something that you've been interested in your entire life, or is that something that's come about the past few years when you were in college, or how did that happen?
Well, usually like every 4 years growing up through elementary school, we would kind of get involved in doing elections and stuff like that. But it really wasn't until I got into my senior year of high school. I took economics one semester and then government the next. And that's when I really got involved because it was 2012, it was going to be election year. And I realized, I'm 18, I'm old enough to vote. I got to figure out, what my political ideology is and all that. So I really started to watch like C-SPAN and watch like, at first I was watching a lot of like mainstream media, and I kind of realized I was more progressive and not as like conservative. And so that's how I started to get involved. I actually have to thank my high school teachers for kind of getting me interested in the political process.
And were they pushing one narrative or another, or was it just something they let you figure out for yourself, or how did that work?
Uh, Growing up, I was always, I guess, kind of liberal. Like I've always was for like gay rights and the rights of minorities. I never really was conservative growing up, and most of my family were Democrats, so that was kind of always in me already. But not my teachers. They actually, I just learned a lot about like like how economics work and how like the government works, and I did pretty well in the classes. So I think I learned quite a bit from what I've remembered.
And how were you in South Carolina in high school? Because I know you have.
Yes.
And
Yeah, I was.
okay, and how because most people realize that South Carolina is a solid red state. Seeing as you are a millennial and were growing up being more liberal than probably most in South Carolina, what did you get a feel that your other classmates were moving in that direction, or were they reflecting off the opinions of their parents and the environment they were in?
Well, no, there's always that saying, like, my parents were Republican and my grandparents were Republican and this and that. I'm not really sure that my classmates in high school were as interested in politics and government as I was, to be quite honest, because I wasn't really a sociable person. But it really wasn't until I got to college where I noticed a lot of people my age were actually caring about the elections and whatnot. I actually made a lot of friends who were big progressives and were for like Bernie Sanders and that branch of like the Democratic Party. So, like I said, it really wasn't until I got into college where people were actually starting to care more about politics and where I was able to make friends with people who actually cared. Because that's politics is one of my interests.
And there is still a large trope among older people, no matter which side of the aisle they lie on, that younger people, specifically in our generation, don't care about politics, and or we don't know exactly what we're talking about when we speak about politics. Uh, when you as you're in your early 20s, when you're thinking about issues that are important to you, what are some of those issues and why are they important to you?
Well, climate change is probably one of the most important issues that I care about. I'm a big supporter of science in general. Learning about fossil fuels and all that, like, was what I learned growing up, and I learned about how dangerous they could be. And knowing with the Trump administration and putting restrictions on the EPA and all that, it worries me because I'm young, I'm in my early 20s, and from the looks of it, our generation is not going to reach the age of 50 or 60 at this point if we don't start caring about the planet. And another issue that I care about, obviously, is money and politics. You and I both watch a certain Young Turks, so we're familiar with all that, because money is killing our democracy. But climate change and getting money out of politics are like two of the most important issues that I care about.
And when it comes down to climate change, what are you more specifically worried about? The fact that, well, at this point, no matter who was going to win the presidency, whether it was Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, that there wasn't going to be much progress. But are you more worried about where the Trump administration is going, or do you feel that just in general business sector still being focused on oil and fossil fuels is more of an issue?
I feel like, how businesses, they want to do all that with the fossil fuels, like what you mentioned about the business. Um, I feel like we're not investing in clean energy and renewable energy. To me, I feel like coal is dead. Investing in pipelines, we need to stop doing that because what's happening with DAPL. And there's room to give solar panels and windmills a chance. I remember I had a customer who created an elevator, but it was powered by water, which was pretty amazing.
And yes, there's so much, even for a business, there's billions and billions of dollars to be made in renewable energies, and it is a little frustrating seeing big companies still wanting to invest in fossil fuels when
it's dangerous.
It is extremely dangerous, and even when we're talking about hydraulic fracking is even more dangerous and destabilizes the tectonic plates wherever you're drilling. And
Yep.
Businesses don't seem to care enough to change and invest heavily in renewable energy, which is it's just a problem. And I guess a lot of that also can be linked to what the other issue you brought up was money and politics, because a lot of these businesses spend billions of dollars donating to both Republicans and Democrats, and that's how they get subsidies, and that's how they get favorable policies. And it's how billionaires can get tax breaks while middle and working class pay a higher tax percentage. And when we mix those two things together, it's kind of what we get now. And that brings into my next question. There are a number of, we'll say liberals that have an issue with young progressives and will enjoy, and I've witnessed it, monitored it, and seeing how they think that younger progressives that are, you would say, on the Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren wing of the party don't know what they're talking about, and can continuously say this is not how things are done. You have to grow up, and I guess a popular term for that is minimal change at best. Just do things slow and steady to get change, which most of the time gets you in a really bad negotiating point, and sees things like President Barack Obama almost did cuts to Social Security because of wanting to negotiate. When you're having to speak, or when you do speak to those individuals, why do you think they are so blocked to why sweeping changes that are actually popular with the majority of Americans?
That is tough to answer because, to me, these crack types, they remind me of like their parents or grandparents when they were talk about, we were against the Vietnam War, we were for civil rights, and I'm thinking to myself, that's what we're kind of doing. Why are you shaming us for doing the same thing? It's really hard to explain. maybe it's just how they believe that whole like stereotype of millennials being entitled and lazy and don't do anything and they just don't care. But the moment we do start to care, we get shunned. We're not taken seriously. It's that's something that I'm gonna have to come back to, because even I have a hard time like explaining, like, these older Democrats are not as liberal as I would assume. They're more moderate in a way, but that's something that I really have to think about, because even I ask myself every day, like, why aren't they more accepting to like the younger folks who are the future? They keep talking about wanting for us to get involved and to take things seriously, but the moment we do, oh no, no, no,
And,
they don't want to hear us.
and it does seem like that is something I've witnessed and seen. And is when it seems like a lot of people feel that things Bernie Sanders pushed for that are important to millennials, whether it's reforming college tuition rates and making
Yep.
college tuition public universities tuition free, and wide sweeping changes on the way we handle the environment, and those type of issues. They are getting money out of politics, which you would think would be something both parties would want. They seem to be very reluctant, and I'm not sure whether a lot of that comes from.
Maybe it's because like some of those individuals, like, the baby boomers are kind of getting the blame for why everything is the way it is. How, us as millennials, how we're kind of, it's our job to fix everything that we didn't even ask for. That could be a little bit of an explanation, possibly.
No, the baby boomers they benefited from FDR's social democrat policy. So it is a little funny when older generations say millennials are entitled or haven't
Yep.
worked for anything, when FDR put in all these policies that started to be eroded away in the 70s and until now, where we're basically in a neoliberal state where we're having to deal with these issues in our generation to try to fix them. So I found that a little ironic when you think about it. But just going forward, but when you speak to them, and is it difficult for you to try to get through to them and see this is, well, no matter what facts you bring up, there always seems to be a defense for a corporate Democrat that loves these money in politics. And I've personally seen people say, oh no, these millions of dollars in donations don't influence a vote at all. And then you recently see things like Cory Booker and his vote for bringing in medications from Canada. And you see that he receives the second most money in the Senate from the insurance lobby and pharmaceutical industry. Well,
And they're
pharmaceutical
in New
industry.
Jersey too.
No, go ahead.
And from what I've heard, that some of the biggest pharmaceutical companies are actually, the manufacturers are actually in New Jersey. So there's kind of a reason why he specifically votes on their side.
And that's when you there's so many examples of that, like Hillary Clinton and her ties to big banks and all the money that she received in campaign donations, and to give an hour speech for $250,000. And you see these type of things, and again, the more of you can say they're basically liberals or getting close to just being moderate, period, don't have an issue with that. Or when you're explaining to them why younger voters have these problems, do you feel you're getting through to them, or do you feel that they are kind of stuck in their opinions?
Very, very little. I mean, I feel like a lot of them are in, like, they live in California or they live in New York, so they feel like they're invisible and they live in this little bubble. Don't want to be mean to them, but I feel like they think like nothing can touch them because they live in a solid blue state like California or New York. But from what I'm seeing, I remember hearing that that they want to break up like the Ninth Circuit Court, like in California, like they want to try to make it more conservative. I'm like, you guys have to pay attention to what's going on in your own states, so that you don't have, California won't go red. I mean, hopefully they listen, but just assuming that you're invisible and nothing can touch you, that's that ignorance. That's not gonna, work out. You have to pay attention. You got to keep going. So I'm hoping that they will learn, because Trump being president, anything can happen at this point.
Well, that's definitely true at this point. And then going into to that issue, there's still this sweeping debate that Bernie Sanders would have not defeated Donald Trump, despite me personally having to stare at numbers for literally months and months on end, and seeing at the final poll that he was defeating Trump by 12 percentage points, and which actually the poll between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, margin of error wise, stayed within the margin of error. Hillary Clinton was beating Trump at that last poll, I believe, by 4, and ended up beating him by 2 something. That's within the margin of error. So if you respect those polls, well, she beat him in the popular vote by around 2. But if you respect those polls, there is no chance at all that Bernie Sanders would have not had an overwhelming electoral college victory over Donald Trump. And it seems like a lot of people are still pushing for, we still need a establishment Democrat. We can't have someone like Elizabeth Warren or Donald Trump or Tulsi Gabbard or anyone who were, even they're still pushed back against Keith Ellison to be the head of the DNC. And it seems to be reluctant. This is despite overwhelmingly, when you look at polls, that younger people are progressive, like, period. It seems to be logical. It's like, okay, we can win elections if we listen to these voters, we can get them engaged. Well, there's a lot of pushback against that. When you see that, are you worried about the future of the country? Because it could be, again, if they go through with the same process that was seen in the past cycle, could have 8 years of Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what worries me is that it seems that Democrats are afraid of what the Republicans think. Like with Keith Ellison, a lot of Democrats are like, imagine if we had a Muslim man of color heading the DNC, that would look bad on us. No, it won't. It would be an amazing thing. I mean, no matter how people like to say, oh, conservatives are Islamophobic and racist, you might want to look within your own party too, because there are people who are reluctant to elect Keith Ellison because he is a Muslim and a man of color. So the Democrats need to stop caring what the Republicans think. They just gotta stop. To me, it feels like they try to, the Democrats try to get the Republican base on their side when they need to give up. They need to go for their own base, the progressives, the liberals, people within their own base who are saying, hey, pay attention to us.
And it actually is a kind of an antiquated approach, because again, you just look at the polls. Younger generations are like, oh, you're Muslim, I don't care. You're gay, I don't. Well, that doesn't affect me. Like, and I mean, that's overwhelmingly between, even specifically 18 and 24. It's like, we don't care. This is a inflated thing the media does, that points at fringes and tries to highlight that, rather than looking and speaking to your average citizen. I mean, like, we're going to talk to you and see what you say. And we're going to, oh, this is what real people say, and that kind of goes into my next question about especially on, well, both sides have this, but it seems to be prevalent right now, specifically on the very far left, where we're having individuals say things. For example, at the Women's March was something funded by George Soros, that he somehow paid 2.9 million people to be up there, that this is a distraction, and that it was all white, and that the people there, it didn't represent anyone of color or anyone that wasn't a white female, which is, you just look at it, it's just, all that is 100% false. Like, it's just false. There were so many different organizations there, Black Lives Matter, there was Planned Parenthood, there was the unions, there was so many people there. And it was just like, and people present this fact as they call themselves commentators. I'm not sure if they're willfully ignorant to put this information out there to make money, or if they honestly think they're correct, or if they're believing in what Kelly Conway points out and says is an alternative fact. Do you find this worrisome, and that it could actually move people that could be voting in a progressive way to just not believing in anything, and just rather sit at home because if they feel it's all hopeless, because they're being led astray by these commentators that are not speaking anything factual?
I remember when CNN covered the Women's March, the panel was and like one female. So that kind of irked me the wrong way. And what people don't understand that the Women's March was not some like Hillary Clinton, organization. It was actually funded by a Latina woman, a Palestinian woman, and an African American woman. So it wasn't funded by George Soros. And I don't understand why George Soros is commented as like the boogeyman of the left, who's always responsible for like left-wing protests. So we need to end that. But I'm still waiting for my check, by the way. But it does worry me when people cannot trust any form of news. You can't trust mainstream media. And then, there's progressives and, left-wing media outlets who are being completely dishonest, and they're just there to get, attention and ad revenue, I'm assuming. And I feel like people that, us as progressives, we need to stand up to these people who are just flat out being dishonest. I mean, the whole point of having, trustworthy news is, so that we can trust these people. And I don't feel like, a lot of them are not being, honest with their reporting. And it's all about views and ad revenue for them and not actually bringing out decent content.
And it's a little alarming and frustrating for me because I have to spend hours on making sure I find things that are factual and put them out there. And hearing someone just plain out say that, I'm not even sure where you get the notion that any individual is paying hundreds of dollars to 2.9 million people at a time. It just seems ridiculous. And so it's frustrating me personally. And when do you personally come across people who hear this type of rhetoric and are saying things that are easily proven to not be true? And if so, how do you speak to them about their points of view?
I've known a few people who kind of like got caught because I noticed this during the primaries, a lot of, there is a lot of truth to fake news. Like I would be in certain progressive groups and they would be sharing like stuff from a lot of right-wing websites or sites that just popped out of nowhere during the primaries. And I would always make sure to like double check, if this is false, because, fact checkers they could be making quite a bit of money these next few years, I'm assuming. But, I try to tell them like, no, guys, try to not be angry, just kind of, be calm, say, guys, this is not true. Here's the facts. But even sometimes, you're called a shill or whatever. And it's just like, you can't get through them. They've gone too far. You can't get through them. No matter how calm you are and how, the stuff that you back up with, it doesn't matter. You're, if you don't agree with them, then you're just a shill, sell out, this and that. And I've had my fair share of debates about that stuff.
And
not easy.
And what outlets do you trust that you will go to and read and feel like that they are not trying to lie to you for some narrative or purpose to make themselves money?
Well, I like The Intercept. Glenn Greenwald. He does excellent reporting. So is Lee Fong, the Ivy Times, and The Guardian, or even sometimes from time to time like PBS, or I don't really share much from like CNN or MSNBC or Fox, like mainstream media outlets. From time, I will share stuff from Raw Story time to time. It really depends on who is writing the article. If I'm familiar with their work, I go back and find out what they previously, published. And because the Washington Post has issues with this, like everyone's like, oh, the Washington Post is such a credible source. I'm like, well, the thing is, the people that are writing a lot of like, Russia articles also pushed for the Iraq War. So that's something to take in consideration. So for me, I always make sure, to look at the author's history of what they published.
Washington Post specifically decided over a 24-hour period to release 17 anti-Bernie Sanders articles while they published about 10 positive Hillary Clinton articles, not even pretending that they were being a real journalist outlet, just posting out things that they wanted to happen. And yes, it's famous that the Washington Post hasn't found a war it is yet to dislike.
And
their editorial.
And a lot of white women who journalists who supported Hillary, they were like, I remember some of them running out was like, oh, Trump's not the real problem. It's like Cruz and Rand Paul. Like, we have to worry about them. We don't worry about Trump. He's not going to get it. Now look where we are. And now they're still angry at Bernie for running against Hillary. How sexist of him to do that.
Yeah, there's arguments like that. That is, yeah, it's hard to even take that seriously, because you're wanting to call a man that has perfect ratings from every single left group that has to do with women's rights, and you're going to call him a sexist. And then when Donald Trump decides to do whatever Donald Trump says, that Megyn Kelly's bleeding from her whatever, or all the different comments he's made that he wants to grab women by their genital, you're not going to call it. So when you say Bernie Sanders is sexist, you lose credibility to say that Donald Trump is being sexist when he actually is, because you wasted all that on saying Bernie Sanders is sexist, which is, again, kind of ridiculous. So there are a lot of issues on the left as well, from a reporting sense, that I have to see and just kind of laugh at, especially when comparing, like, you actually have more resources to get information than I do, but you still report things that are nonsensical. But it's more of a journalist thing. And when you're looking at the Trump administration and seeing, because just he's been president for less than a week, and there's already been the Women's March protest. There's already been Standing Rock protest after he decided to push forward the Keystone Pipeline and then the Dakota Access Pipeline. And there's still more demonstrations planned. Do you feel confident about the country standing up to some of these policies, or are you still fearful of what he could push forward?
Well, if I were president, here's what I would do. I would listen to what public opinion is. Simple as that. Yes, I'm happy that people are out there marching, but what happens after you march? Are you actually going to get involved? Maybe sign up to do, because I want to try to get some of my friends involved in something. Our local city council has been running unopposed for the last century. Hopefully some of us might run for a few positions. It's like, that's what I want to happen. Like, yeah, people are marching, but people have to get involved in the political process.
No, that is great advice, because it is more than being in the streets protesting. The vote matters, and people need to still get out there and vote. There are issues with election fraud, with people having their voting rights hampered. But if still these individuals go out there and vote in droves, there's not as much election fraud going to be needed, or that can actually stop all that. And going forward, when we are looking at these issues that America is facing right now, what do you feel is the biggest challenge coming from the Trump presidency?
I fear that he's not going to listen to any of us, because so far he hasn't, it seems. That's my thing. Like, Obama was actually persuaded to change some of his positions by public opinion, not making cuts to, Social Security, marriage equality. Like, I don't think Trump is going to be persuaded by anybody on the left at this point. Ivanka, his daughter, is all about, I care about climate change and all this, but he's not listening to her from what he's been doing.
And just for you personally, when you're thinking about, again, being in your early 20s and what could happen in the future politically in the United States, what would you like to see happen politically? What do you feel? How involved do you personally want to get in politics, and what do you see in the future for yourself, and what do you want to see in the country?
I'm hoping that a real progressive movement happens and stays put, like it doesn't go away, because that's kind of the problem. Like, with a lot of movements, they start off, something and then they die down, whether it's because of the media with Occupy Wall Street or something like that. I'm hoping that, that nobody gives up. And what I'm hoping to do, South Carolina is a red state. I'm hoping to help like a Democrat or any like type of Democrat or even like Green, because in South Carolina we can have fusion candidates where you could be on the Green ballot and the Democratic ballot. I'm hoping to maybe work with candidates. I really want to actually like do more volunteer work. I'm very introverted, but I want to get involved. I feel like I'm not doing anything, I want to do something.
No, this is definitely a good first step, because I think it takes people getting their voices out there to help encourage other people to get involved and look for places to get involved, because there are people out there that probably wouldn't want to, but they just don't know where to go or how to do it. But I do think you're taking a good first step. And before we wrap up, when you're looking at personally, would you personally want to run for city council? Would you want to help on a campaign for someone to run for city council? Because that's a very local issue at the city level. So how would you approach that?
Hopefully maybe like if someone, but at this point no one is like running for any of the local positions. I'm kind of hoping that I can gather a bunch of my friends who actually care about politics and are as progressive as I am to run for these specific types of positions, because like I said, they've been running unopposed for God knows how long. And one of my friends told me during the last elections, he was like, yeah, I wrote you in for city council. And I was like, wait, what? Why'd you do that?
Well, that's a good story.
Start from the bottom and work your way up.
Isn't that a Drake song?
I didn't even know that.
Start from the bottom, now we're here.
Oh yeah.
But I guess before we wrap up, is there anything that you would like to say in closing about what you feel about political system, what you feel about millennials getting involved, or anything at all?
What I have to say is, to all the millennials, do not let older people or even other millennials your age, don't let them get you down. Keep fighting. It'll all work out in the end.
No, I think that's a good way to end.
So inspiring.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to end the interview. And again, it was a great talking to you. And again, we should talk again in the future.
Yep. For sure.